Mitch, hello, my friend. Good to see you here. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, hi, Paul. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I feel like it's
My-
kind of a long time coming.
It has
So
been. I
we've
see you a lot. I see you a lot on LinkedIn, and we're crossing paths in social media. But yeah, we should have done this a long time ago. So it's good.
all right. So while we dig in here, let's get started by having you just share a little bit about your shop, about yourself, how you got into the
Yeah.
industry, how you got around to starting a shop, and just that backstory.
That's quite a story. We may have to do some abbreviation here, but
Okay.
but I started my career as a machinist. Actually, I went to engineering school for about 6 weeks, and I realized I just didn't like college. It wasn't for me. So I went to trade school, took machining, and went to work in a shop that was very progressive. And this was in the '80s, and they had bought a couple of new Mazaks, and I happened to be the new guy that was eager to learn, and right place, right time. And they had won some contracts with Ford Motor Company to
Mm.
produce some tools and dies to stamp out some automotive parts. So it was a lot of 3D surfacing, 3D machining. So it
Mhm.
wasn't basic prismatic parts. So I sort of cut my teeth on complex geometry, and so I did that for about 6 years, and then I was
Mhm.
recruited into the airline business, and
Mm,
went to
cool.
work for Northwest Airlines to set up rapid manufacturing operations. They they were having trouble getting parts for their airplanes
So
timely. And as you
spares
could,
and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and as you could imagine, if you have an airplane sitting on the ground waiting for a part, that's a lot of money that's just wasting away. So they hired me to come in and set up a CNC shop to do reverse engineering and then make parts on demand in order to
Wow.
increase fleet utilization. So I got that going, and that parlayed into a couple of other roles, and then I ended up in a role as a project manager in aircraft acquisitions. So I led buying used airplanes
Oh,
uh,
wow.
and 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 subcontracting all over the world to have them recommissioned and modified, and was about $800 million worth of work that I was managing there, and it moved myself up to a really high executive place in the airline business, and I was pretty darn happy. And then one day I received a call from a guy named Bob Bean, who was one of the founders of a company called CAD Key. And if you remember, that's one of the first PC-based CAD software packages. And
Okay.
he asked me if I was interested in going into the reseller business. And I'm like, you must have got a really old resume. I'm now an executive at an airline. I'm far removed from CAD and that stuff. And he said, well, I think you might be interested. So he sent me a package to show me that they had a bunch of really small dealers from Texas to the Carolinas in the South. And they wanted to combine that into like a mega dealer. And they had a lot of customers that were on software maintenance. And
Mhm.
they were going to roll that into the dealer. And he said that we've partnered up with Bill Gibbs and GibbsCam, and he's looking to do the same thing. So if you're interested, you can take on CADKey and GibbsCam and have the entire South with a ready-made customer base. And so I
Hmm.
looked at that and I saw that was a couple of $1 million of revenue right out of the gate. It was a very
Right.
unique opportunity. And I just decided that I could always go back and get a corporate job, but to launch a startup with a couple $1 million in revenue out of the gate was a really rare and unique opportunity.
Indeed.
So I
Wow.
so I so I quit the job at the airline, um, inherited those customers. I'm knowing that I have to really be careful to protect that maintenance, to add value, and be, you know, more than just software updates every now and then. I had to be a partner. So I'm
Hmm.
setting up events all around, tips and tricks, and allowing people to get to know each other. And after about 2 years uh, of doing that, business is going great, really stable, and I'm noticing that at all my events, that my customers are enjoying getting together and talking about projects. They're something they've designed, they want a shop to quote. Or there's shops that were looking for work. And so I was constantly introducing my customers. And then one day I had a lunch where I introduced a few shops to a few of my design customers. They were really happy. I was driving out of the parking lot. And this was a long time ago. This was 1999.
Okay.
And on the radio, I hear this ad, this commercial. Request your mortgage and let lenders compete. And that was a eureka moment to me. I'm like, wow, someone should do that in manufacturing. And so I rushed home and I registered some domain names, and I got manufacturingquote.com and mfgquote.com. That ultimately became mfg.com.
Right.
And I thought that it was going to be a customer service tool, community builder to my CAD and CAM customers. But soon after I got it going, and I wrote the first version myself, by the way.
Oh, really? So
I didn't.
that too.
Well, yeah. Well, I didn't know when I did PHP, and back then things were not as developed as they are today, right? And I didn't have database skills, so I just used a flat file. And every time somebody put a comma in their company name, it messed me up because it threw every field in the whole system off. I'm sure you can relate. And so as people started using the system more and more, I spent my whole day opening up the file, moving commas. And so I began to quickly realize that I needed to hire like some professional developers. But I introduced that to my customer base, and they started using it to do transactions, matching up people's needs for manufacturing to the shops that have the right equipment, expertise, capacity at the right moment in time. And once I did that, people that were not my software customer started contacting me. Said, "Can I join your marketplace?" And I was like, "Well, it's really for my software customers." And then I started to think, well, I should open this up. So I said, "Okay, $1,000 for a membership for a year." People start sending checks, and it starts happening from all over the world, from Latin America, from Europe, from Eastern Europe, from Asia. And it just starts to balloon. And it was an interesting ride because in those days, we didn't have all the infrastructure that we have today. Right? We didn't have Amazon. We didn't have EC2. We didn't have all the software development tools. So I had to build my own data center, have my own servers and backup devices and teams that managed all those servers. And so it was consuming cash, and I didn't know how to raise money, so I did it the old-fashioned way. 8 credit cards, cash my 401k, mortgage the house, and start building this marketplace, and sold off the reseller business, and got the business to profitability. Had offices around the world, and then in 2006. I got a call one day from this as a voicemail on my phone. I come into the office, and this guy says, "Hi, I work for Jeff Bezos, and he would like to meet you. He's very interested in what you're doing." And so I go to Seattle and meet with Jeff Bezos, and found out he is just passionate about manufacturing, loves manufacturing, and he saw the opportunities in the market. And early days of Blue Origin, so he took me over, introduced me to the engineers, and that was where I found out he had learned about mfg.com because his engineers at Blue Origin were using it, and then he had used it. So Jeff, I struck a deal with Jeff where I sold him part of the company, and then soon after that, Fidelity was Bezos chasing, and they wanted to get involved in the deal. And so I sold part to Fidelity. And then in 2012, late 2012, company's going great. And I had turned 50 and went for my physical and realized that I had cancer.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, that is not my plan. That was not my life plan. Colon cancer. So I'm a big advocate. When you start hitting that age, get your screening. It can save your life. And so I just didn't expect it because I didn't have any problems,
Sure.
And so I went through that. I had two surgeries, and fortunately I caught it early enough they were able to cut it out. and it hadn't spread. But it was a real
Wow.
wake up call to me, because that took me out of the business for about, 2.5 months. And the first time I had been away from MFG.com in 13 years since I'd started it.
Hmm.
And I realized that I wanted to do something different. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted to do something different. And the business probably needed something different. I think, um, CEOs are good to a certain point, and then we should let someone else bring in some fresh energy. And I think that point had happened. So I took about a year off, just thinking about what I really wanted to do. And I realized that I love making parts. I was thinking back to my early days as a machinist and at the airline, and that was what gave me joy. That was what gave me satisfaction. It was really nice moving around bits and bytes and connecting people, but producing something tangible,
Hmm.
it just gave me more satisfaction. And so I started ZYCI with that, and thought I was just going to keep it as a little small business just to have a little fun with, and because I didn't want to retire.
Hmm.
And little did I know when it was going to take off and become it's a pretty significant business. But one more part of that story. Simultaneously, I started. I've been friends uh, John Hirschtick, who was one of the founders of SolidWorks, and then Scott Crump, who founded Stratasys. Been friends with them for a long time, and soon after I started ZYCI, they were in Atlanta, invited me out for dinner, and Scott Crump asked me about if I'd start a business that Stratasys wanted to own, but
Okay.
it needed to be created by someone first. So I
Okay.
created a business called Fast Radius, partnered with UPS on that business, and created a global additive manufacturing business, sort of almost like an elastic cloud for additive manufacturing to facilitate digital virtual inventory for SKUs that don't exist today. And so, anyway, long story. Apologize for all that, but that's how I ended up having ZYCI and being in the machining business today. So it's kind of
Wow.
fun doing it, not being a rookie entrepreneur, and doing it because it's a love and something that I choose to do.
Right. Wow. What a story. I didn't know you were involved in Fast Radius. That is new to me. So that's
Yeah,
incredible.
I was the sole founder. I founded that business in 2014. Yeah.
Right. Wow. And then Stratasys then bought it at some point. Is that right?
No, it actually went. Fast Ratings actually went public recently.
Oh
So
wow.
basically, we started bringing in more investors and more private equity, and
Hmm.
uh, and I had to choose: did I want to run Fast Radius or I want to run ZYCI? Because
Hmm.
both were pretty fast growing businesses, and honestly, I prefer, with the experiences that I've had, I know that I prefer to run a business that I own 100% of. And I
Right.
have no debt, no board of directors, no partners,
Right.
versus Fast Radius had a number of corporate investors, corporate partners, venture capitalists.
Hmm.
And, that's a way to really help companies scale and grow. But I don't personally enjoy that dynamic.
Hmm.
So I figure I'd rather focus on running a CNC machining business that I don't have to have partners or investors.
Wow. What a story. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about what ZYCI looks like today.
Yeah, so we are about 50 people.
Okay.
We have two facilities, 30 about 32 CNC machines, mostly Akuma,
Hmm.
uh, producing flight hardware, AS9100, and it has been it's been a rocket ship, honestly. And some of the core tenets, of founding the business has been speed, has been urgency, right?
Okay.
Because, you know, people in today's timeline, especially in the aerospace industry, with all that's going on with, lots and lots of space companies developing satellites, developing rockets, time is super valuable. So,
Hmm.
so one of the core values what I started the business with is that if we can compress timelines, if we can take weeks off of something, that's valuable, and people will pay us a premium for that time.
Hmm.
So we focus on urgency, quick communication. We try to get quotes back to customers within 48 hours, and communicate overly. And so we have found that to be a model that has worked well for attracting customers and growing customers.
Hmm. What do they tell you about your focus on that versus other vendors that they used to use, or um, just yeah, it sounds like that's a real
Yeah.
differentiator.
Yeah, they tell us that we make it easy for them to do business with.
Okay.
And that's the key for any business, right? Be easy to do business with. Be
Hmm.
fast. Be detailed in your communication. I don't want them to have to ask a question about a quote. I want to make sure
Right.
everything is there, it's cut and dried, and we got it back to them quickly. Now,
Yeah.
I'll tell one of my little secrets here that I learned with MFG.com. We would put up an RFQ, and normally, I will say it was over 80% of the time, the buyer would award the job to the first quote that came back. They wouldn't wait for two or three or four because they want to
Wow.
get moving because time is valuable, right? And
Right.
so I took that learning and I realized if we're faster than everyone else, then your chance of winning is much higher
Hmm.
because and I remember talking with one of my customers at one point, and he said one of the nice things about getting quotes back really, really fast is that I can go back to what I was doing, back to designing, back about my day. If I'm waiting 2 or 3 days for all the quotes to come in, that's just 3 days lost. And
Right.
yeah, there might be a cheaper quote that comes in, but it probably doesn't outweigh what those 3 days get me.
Hmm. So you probably, like you said on the on MFG, you'd see a quote come in, and I don't know if you could see the prices, but let's say it's
You could,
$100, they just
yeah.
go for it. Later that day, someone submits a quote for $70, but it's too
Mm-hmm.
late. They
Too late.
lost out. Yeah.
They lost out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
speed was everything.
Yeah.
And so we carry that today, and it stresses my team and my staff because we try to get quotes back. We work 24 hours, and now we've gone to 48. But that's a tall task with some of the complex, especially when you're dealing with flight hardware, some
Hmm.
complexities. But we work really hard on that, and the feedback that we've gotten from the market is that it works, and
Hmm.
the our win rate is incredibly high because of that. And again, we may not be the cheapest, but we're trying to do lead time that is a little faster than everyone else's, and we're trying to get the quotes back faster. So we're saving. The sooner they award the PO to us, the sooner the lead time starts.
Hmm. Sure. Of course.
So if you're a
So
week faster plus 3 days faster quoting, that's real time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they call it a space race because it is a race. Everyone's racing to get their rockets built
That's
and
right.
into
That's right.
space. Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. Um,
Yeah.
so, so what year did you start ZYCI?
2014, early 2014.
Okay. Okay. And you're about 50. So 22. So about 8 years
8 years.
ago. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 That's significant growth. When did you decide to pursue AS9100? And did you decide to do that from day one that you wanted to?
No, I actually, that's a great question. I didn't from day one. It was spawned by a customer, and actually
Okay.
it was a government, NavAir, in China Lake, California, the Advanced Weapons Division. They had an IDIQ contract, and I'm not how many people are so familiar with IDIQ contracts for the military, but they're indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, and basically they give you a placeholder purchase order, and then they place POs against that purchase order over a period of years. And
Hmm.
so they had a upcoming demand for an IDIQ contract for manufacturing services. And one of the commanders called me up and said, I'm familiar with you from your past work and different stuff, and I think you'd be a really good candidate to bid on this IDIQ." And so I started reading the requirements, and one of the requirements of the IDIQ is was you had to have AS 9100 in order to qualify even to bid.
Right.
So that was in 2016, late
Okay.
2016, and that's what spawned me to go do it and then bid for that contract.
Wow. So that must be nice to have people from the government calling you up and saying, "Hey, would you like to bid on this?" How have you generally gone about doing your sales and marketing?
Yeah. So we don't. I've never hired anyone in sales. We don't have a salesperson or sales department,
Hmm.
and I've spent very, very, very little on marketing. I've done a little bit of retargeting. I'm sure you're familiar with
Yep.
retargeting on the web, a little bit of that sort of stuff. But other than that, I just built a really good website, targeted SEO, and made sure to circulate the word among people that I know, and got a good group of core customers initially, and once we did that, it begins to just snowball because those engineers or those buyers go to another
Mhm.
company, and if you maintain a good reputation and you performed for those people, they tend to bring you along. And I would say a lot of our customer base has grown organically like that, and we don't have sales or marketing.
Right. Yeah. Well, the advice on a really good website with focus on SEO, it's so important. In the early days of my shop, we in like around 2000, 2001, we
Hmm.
really went heavily onto that, and there was a
Hmm.
period of time for a year or so. If you searched CNC machine shop in Google, procnc.com was the number one organic result, and
Yeah,
we had all sorts of inquiries. And then it got more
yeah,
competitive, and we couldn't retain the first spot. But yeah,
yeah.
so important.
I remember that with MFG.com. I was doing the SEO myself, and it was so much easier back then, right?
It
Because you
was.
could do all sorts of keyword stuffing and hidden the links and have a pixel that was a link, and there was all sorts of ways you could do to game the system, and that didn't last though. Google figured that out after a period of a few
Yes,
years.
no black hat
So,
SEO
yeah,
for sure.
exactly, exactly. So now it's all legitimate content.
Yeah,
So.
well, that's great advice. Um,
Mhm.
wow. So, I really want to kind of key into this making business easy to do with your company.
Mhm.
So, besides
Mhm.
returning your quotes quickly and
Mhm.
being very communicative, what other things are you doing to just make it easy to do business with ZYCI?
Yeah, well, I think that's not having necessarily boilerplate um, parameters around terms, how you do business, uh, and think about what does the customer really want? What are they trying to achieve, right? And if it's if they need a super fast lead time on something. They probably don't need it on all the parts, but how can I get
Mhm.
you to quickly, right? And,
Right.
and, and I think being, innately tuned in to what the customer's trying to say and what they're trying to achieve and helping them meet that
Hmm.
and then structuring a way that works for them. Whether it's payment terms, some corporations are locked into where they need 60-day, 90-day payment terms.
Right.
Why? I don't know. It's because some buyer's checking it off on his goals. If I got my suppliers to have 90-day payment term. And so
Right.
like we will absolutely do that for you. But we're going to
Right.
give you three different quotes. We're going to give you the price for 30 days, the price for 60 days, and the price for 90 days. You choose. Uh, and
I
but
like
we
that.
make it. But if they need it, rather than arguing, we can't give you 90 days. We'll give it to you, but there's a
Sure.
cost of money. There's a cost of
Yeah.
money, and we'll let you know what that is, right?
Right.
And so especially a lot of buyers at bigger corporations, sometimes their goals and incentives, it's important. They'll never tell you what they are, but it's sometimes it's speed, sometimes it's price savings, it's extending payment terms. But I think by listening, you can drill into that, and the more you help them meet their goals, so they get their bonus, the better off you're going to do in their eyes.
Hmm. Do you ever just ask them point blank? What is, yeah, what are your goals? What are you trying to, what's going to make you look good in your company and have success for you?
Yeah, I probably don't, I probably say it a little differently, but I'm
Sure.
like, yeah, how are you judged in your role?
Right.
And they'll open up a lot of times, right? Oh, I need, I've got to get all my suppliers on net 45, and I got to get all the lead times down to 3 weeks, and I got to get suppliers holding some amount of inventory for us. And I'm like, no problem, we'll make that happen, right? So I do ask when how does your company judge you when you go in for your review? And so
Yeah.
I'll just ask the buyers point blank sometimes, and they'll,
Sure.
they'll they'll tell you, they'll open up about, because they want you to help them meet their goals.
Sure. That's such
You
good
know,
advice. Wow.
yeah.
Amazing. Um, so I'd love to hear a little bit about. Obviously, these days it's hard to find and attract and hire and retain skilled machinists and programmers and people with those skills. Obviously,
Mhm.
you've hired at least 50 of them plus probably more. Yeah, what is your strategy around finding employees these days?
Yeah, it's not easy. There's no secret sauce. It takes constant work, and I am out there, um, just always looking, sending messages to people, and we're encouraging the machinists that work for us to bring in people that they know from places they used to work. Providing them with a little bit of a bonus for doing so.
Okay, I was going to
Uh, I
ask you.
just I just hired I just hired a guy that started this week from Wisconsin. Uh, 3 years ago, I saw him posting on LinkedIn photos of incredible parts that he was making, and so I messaged him and was like, "That's incredible work." Started a dialogue that has kept up for 3 years, and I said to him, "You ever thought about moving to Atlanta?" And he said, "I'd kind of like to move south one day. I just don't know when that will be." And then about a month ago, he messaged me and said, "Okay, I'm ready to move south. Do I still interested?" And I'm like, "Dude, you got a job. Come on." And he started this past Monday. So,
That's amazing.
so
That's the long view.
online trolling people that make great parts and put up photos.
That is a great strategy. And you do that
Yeah.
yourself, or do you have HR people that also reach out like that?
No, I kind of do that myself because I feel like there's a bit of an eye to that. I know what I'm looking for.
Hmm.
I know what I'm looking for. Look, and you can tell that the people that look like have real talent and experience versus the ones that are kind of posers. And so,
Okay.
so I try to be very thoughtful and engage and have a little bit of a dialogue. And then once I realize I got a good fish on the line, then I get a
Hmm.
little more aggressive. But we were able to build a team of really super people, and I mean, we pay them well. I would say slightly above market, but even that won't keep them.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
for sure.
you still have to treat them well, give them good technology, uh, some autonomy to make decisions, uh, and there's pluses and minuses to that because, as you well know, when you're doing flight hardware, you need standardization as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
But when you get machinists in that know stuff really well. Some want Mastercam, some want GibbsCam, some want NX, some want SurfCam, some want Fusion 360, some like shunt tooling, some like Lindex, and so we try to give them autonomy to use the tools and things that they like and are familiar with, while trying to keep some consistency and standardization. And
Right.
so it helps that we give people uh, really good machines and technologies to learn and very challenging parts and push the envelope.
Hmm. So do you indeed have 3 or 4 different cam systems that different programmers use?
We do. We have
Okay.
we have Mastercam, we have Katia, we have GibbsCam, and we have Fusion 360.
Okay. Wow. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's not inexpensive. So that's an investment,
It,
obviously.
it's not. But you know what? Think about the investment here. When someone comes in and they're like, hey, we've got 2 extra licenses to GibbsCam, and they're like, yeah, but I've been using Mastercam for 20 years.
Hmm.
But what's the cost of switching that person, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so, if you let them kind of stay natively with what they know well, they hit the ground running a whole lot faster.
Hmm.
Now, this may wind up being a can of worms for me down the road, but for
Sure.
now, it allows people to come in. We're not trying to change their skill set, and they get
Right.
up to speed quickly.
And so I'm curious then, do you, are you mostly smaller volume? Obviously, you cater to the quick turn. But are your programmers setting up and running their own jobs, or do you have a separate programming department and different setup machinists?
We have both. We have both.
Okay.
So we began the business. I began the business as like sort of fast turn on complex parts,
Yep.
and so very small volumes, very complex. Each machinist doing his own programming, setup, fixturing, everything. But what's happened naturally when you do that for a long time, that you start to get production orders, right? When you
Hmm.
develop the prototypes and you iterate, it turns
Yep.
into volume. So
Yeah.
we've sort of got a bifurcated business now where I have two facilities in Atlanta, and one facility is dedicated to low volume quick turn, and the other facility is dedicated to ongoing production of flight hardware and
Okay.
some FFL firearm
Sure.
components as well. But
Sure.
so we actually, it just wasn't the way I planned it. I didn't think of the strategy, but it's turned out that the low volume complex has been a really nice feeder for the
Hmm.
production.
Yeah. In our shop, it was kind of the opposite, actually. We started out mostly in production, but then we'd have clients asking us, hey, could you do some prototypes as well? We'd try to schedule it in amongst the production, and that was just super hard, right?
Yeah.
Because you're breaking down jobs, you're setting something else up, it's messing up with your dates. So we decided strategically to launch a prototype division. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, we had about a half a dozen journeyman level folks that did nothing but, they had their own machines, their own, they programmed right there at the machine. They had their Mastercam. We pretty much had
Mm-hmm.
ended up hiring most people that use Mastercam.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great to keep those separate, because I know shops today
Yeah.
still that try to mix the two, and it's just so difficult because it's very different kinds of work.
It is. They're very different businesses, and I certainly didn't appreciate that as we began the journey. But it's a different mindset, and that's why we sort of had to bifurcate it into two different buildings just to get the different
Wow.
mindsets.
Right.
Because on the prototyping, fast turn side of things, you improvise, right?
Sure.
You improvise. You don't think about documenting your code so well because you're probably never going to see that again. You don't think about optimizing speeds and feeds and making sure you got exactly the right repeatable work holding because it's a low volume prototype.
Yeah.
Where on the production side of things, every second matters, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a very different mentality, and we had to we learned that we had to just separate the teams in order and hire people that are from each mentality, because I also find it's hard to take a prototype badass machinist and turn him into a production guy.
Oh, they don't want to sit there pressing a button all day.
No,
Definitely not.
no,
Definitely not.
but even not just pressing a button, but even turn them into like the
The
programmer.
programmer,
that-
sure. Yeah.
even turn them into a programmer for production because they're
Absolutely.
thinking differently. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
thinking differently.
Yeah. Our prototype guys would very often, when they get a model, they would pull it up in CAM. They would start looking at, all right, how am I going to hold this? How am I going to attack it? And then they'd start, programming a roughing tool pass, and then they'd post out the roughing pass and start machining the part while they're
Mm-hmm.
programming all the other tools. So they'd be cutting
Mm-hmm.
chips within like 15, 20 minutes of getting a part number.
Yeah,
And then sometimes they weren't totally sure how they were going to finish it, but they always
yeah,
figured out a way. And it was
yeah.
incredibly
That's
quick.
I know that's what we do.
Yeah.
People will get parts. They post out the first couple of ops. They start roughing while they're programming the rest of the part. Again, not the way you would do it for production.
For
For
sure.
prototyping, it works out most of the time. Sometimes you work
Yeah.
yourself in a corner.
Yes. But
But
just to speak to your point of production people are not the same as prototype people. They think differently, and
Yeah,
they need to think differently.
that's right.
Oh,
That's
that's
right.
super interesting. So one of the questions I like to ask is, I mean, and maybe you've kind of already answered this in a roundabout way, but how do you empower your people? How do you make sure they're fully bought into your culture, and what
Mhm.
is that like?
Yeah, well, that's the key to any business, right? Is culture and the people. As a leader of a company, we can only do so much, and if we don't have a team that believes in the vision and that feels loved and supported and like they're part of something bigger, it's very difficult to grow and scale a company. And so one of the things I like to think about is one, what getting to know people and what are their desires? Do they is their desire to be able to come to work at 8 and get off at 4:30 and go home and play with the kids and the dogs and work in their garden? Or is there a desire to be a shop owner one day? Or is there a desire to buy real estate and buy houses? And I think as you begin to understand what each person wants, as you interact and design the work experience for that person, you can kind of play to that in an authentic way. Because if you're not authentic, they're going to sense that right away. And I think helping people achieve whatever their ultimate goal is over and above coming to work and getting a paycheck goes a long way. And so I actually spend quite a bit of time just getting to know people and what it is that motivates them in life and what are they looking forward to. Because I can guarantee you they're not looking forward to coming in and pushing that button every day. Sure, they do it because it's better than flipping hamburgers, right? But ultimately, there's some vision in their head of what their life looks like down the road. And so I think even just to talk with them about that and recognize that and thinking about ways that you're, helping them get there a little bit at a time, I think that goes a long way. And then on an autonomy standpoint, uh, people nobody likes to be micromanaged, right?
Sure.
And people like to be able to make decisions. A lot of our employees interact directly with customers. We encourage that. If you got a question or you run into an issue, copy me. But it's okay to email the customer directly and tell them what's going on.
Hmm.
Customers appreciate that as well. They're dealing directly with the machinist that has got a challenge with a drawing, or there's a mismatch between the model and the drawing, or he tapped the hole 30 thousandths too deep, and is that going to be okay? And so we let people have that interaction. Now, one of the things that I've learned from prior businesses is when you micromanage, it's very hard to scale. It's
Right.
very hard to get, and once you start that journey of scaling, it will never be as efficient and error free as when you were doing everything yourself. When I did
Hmm.
everything myself, day one of the business, I didn't have to have any meetings because I knew everything. I knew everything that was going on. I didn't have to communicate. I didn't have to tell other people. But the moment that you start adding people, you have to communicate. You have
Hmm.
to delegate. You have to trust, right? And when you start doing that, and as that multiplies, things will slip. People will make
Hmm.
mistakes. Errors will happen. They won't be as efficient as you were doing that. And you have to become okay with that. You have to become okay and realize they're coming up a curve. They're learning. They're not you. They're not where you are. And learning to accept some inefficiency and appreciate that and encourage people along is a skill that I think is helpful. And I didn't learn that till quite a bit later as I was scaling bigger businesses. But empowering people and learning to tolerate some mistakes and inefficiency along the way, and have a good humor about it.
Hmm. Wow, great advice. So I imagine, I mean, you have a unique perspective where you've founded several companies now, but you've also been able to interact and probably look into, to some degree, lots of other shops.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, besides what you just said, what are some of the other things that you've seen that differentiate shops that do grow and become more successful and shops that stay small. And maybe it's because
Mm.
that's the lifestyle that they want. And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah,
But
nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. With MFG.com, I visited shops all around the world. I've been in shops in Taiwan, China, Malaysia, Thailand, and Colombia, and Brazil, and Ukraine, and France. So it was really interesting to get that global perspective of spending a lot of time and meeting with buyers of manufacturing services all around the world. But there's there's no magic, no magic there. But I think, it's organization and efficiency, and that really, when I say organization and efficiency, I mean systems and processes, and you can tell when you're in a shop that has the systems and the processes together, everything just seems easier versus when you're in a shop that is full of chaos, right? You can almost sense it. So systems and processes, and couple that with focus, right? We focus on big parts. We focus on aerospace. We focus on production. We focus on wire EDM. But a lot of times people will think that that broader is better. I've got all these capabilities, but one of the things I've seen in a lot of places is focus actually really allows people to scale profitability and growth, because they become so good at doing that one particular thing, whether it's Swiss turning or wire EDM or horizontal machining production, whatever it is. I think that focus coupled with very good systems and processes.
Man, you are dropping knowledge bombs left and right. This is fantastic. So, yeah, I heard someone say, niche down until it hurts,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, get really good at certain things and don't try to be good at other things, right? And we learned that in our own shop over the years. We tried to take on
Mm-hmm.
parts that were, who knows what, hard metals or cosmetic or this and that, and
Yeah.
yeah, we just learned over time that just it's a recipe for disaster if we try to be good at everything. We just couldn't
Yeah,
be.
yeah. I mean, there are things, what's come to mind, like things that we've realized that we need to outsource. Gun drilling. You know what? Don't try to get into that deep hole gun drilling business. It's not our business. Thread rolling. We're doing some missile parts now. You know, we were thinking, oh, should we try to buy these thread rolling tools? They make them that'll go on a CNC turning center. And we're like, no, just send them to a company that does thread rolling, right?
Right.
And so same thing with cylindrical grinding, right? We'll
Mm-hmm.
send those to people that are really good with cylindrical grinding.
Right.
So focus on what you do well, know what you don't do well, and develop good partners that do those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent advice. So, I'd love to. You clearly you serve the space industry and defense, obviously to some
Mhm.
degree. You've mentioned. Are you in other industries as well? And how do you think about industry diversification and customer diversification?
Yeah, we've got a lot of customer diversification. And we kind of again, because you want to specialize. So I'll say that our aerospace and defense, but we're also doing a lot for theme parks. Think of animatronics. And I'm not allowed to
Oh
mention
wow.
the names, but you can probably guess the names of the major theme parks in Florida and California. But we make animatronics for stuff like that,
Okay.
characters, components, and interestingly enough, those characters and those animatronics are designed to aerospace standards. They want AS9102 reports.
Do they really?
It's a very similar. They use aerospace metals. They use 7075, 2024,
Right.
um, and material search, the whole nine yards. But it's an animated character going into a theme park.
Wow.
What are they worried about? They're worried about someone getting injured. They're worried about longevity. If you think about some, action figure that's going to be moving for 20 years every day, this thing needs to have longevity, well designed. So we do a
Hmm.
lot for theme parks.
Wow.
Uh,
Fascinating.
a lot of we do a lot of robotics as well.
Okay.
It's interesting. We do have our FFL, but we primarily focus on suppressor components. Used to be called
Mm.
silencers. Now they're
Yep.
suppressors. We've gotten really, really good at making baffles that go in suppressors. We have 6 Akuma LT2000s that are turning centers with spindle, subspindle, 2 turrets, live tooling, y-axis, and those baffles that go in suppressors are really thin-walled pieces that you have to be careful. You'll crush it and get it out of it. And so we've just become really, really good, develop a niche on that. So
Mhm.
firearms, robotics, animatronics,
Okay.
aerospace, yeah, so sort of across the gamut there.
If you have an industry that starts to get really kind of heavy, do you strategically try to grow other ones to balance things out,
I really don't.
or you just kind of
No, no,
go where the
no.
orders are coming?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much demand. I guess I haven't really thought about it too much because you know, I'm sure everyone listening or watching can relate to this, but there is so much demand right now. It's hard not to be successful. If you
Hmm.
answer the phone and you respond and you send a quote and you're not crazy greedy, you're going to have success. And so we're kind of enjoying a time that I've never seen in my life before, and especially in American manufacturing. Right, there's so much ITAR, EAR work out there. There's more than there is capacity, and I'm
Sure.
seeing and I'm seeing customers that where the tide has turned where before I think a lot of shop owners felt like the customers had leverage. That's turned these days. Now shops have leverage because these companies need capacity. They need to lock it in. They have
Hmm.
upcoming projects where they've committed to deadlines, and they're actually worried that they're not going to have capacity at the shops to get their parts made. So
Hmm.
shops have leverage today. Now,
Right.
having said that, I think it's very important how you use that leverage because the tide will turn. What comes around goes around. So be very careful because who knows when the music stops, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden now you need that customer, right?
Right.
So you don't want to have taken advantage of them because there was a unique period in time where you could.
Right.
So realize you've got leverage, but use it gingerly.
That's that's very sage. Um, so I interact with a lot of shops. By and large, I hear the same thing, that they're just swamped. They're setting records. They're so busy. But I
Mhm.
also hear occasionally, mostly in forums and stuff, about some shops that or are on LinkedIn or something, where shops are not busy. What do you think the difference is, and what would you say to shops that aren't busy today?
Yeah, you know what? That's it's hard. I'll say it's hard to believe, right? But I'm sure it's happening. I'm sure it's out there. But you know what? The ones and I know some that are like that. And part of the reason is the owner is a guy that he was a machinist and he
Mhm.
bought a machine and he got a small shop, put it in his garage, whatever. He's got a nice little business and he's out there every day and he's making parts and he's working on strategy with his machinist and he's thinking about that. And he never, in his mind, it hasn't occurred to him that he's no longer a machinist. He's now an entrepreneur. He's a business owner, right? And because if you're out of the shop making parts, who's taking care of the business side of the business? And
Mhm.
so and what does that mean? That means talking to the existing customers. I get most every customer that one of these shops has. I bet you they have more work if you just talk to them about it. You could
Mhm.
probably get it, or they can refer you, right?
Right.
And so there's a lot of work to be had if you spend the time just engaging with your customers. And obviously it's a generalization, but a lot of the shops that I know that because I have some that will reach out to me asking, do we have any overflow work because they're not busy, but it's because they're very inwardly focused
Mhm.
on programming and making parts and not necessarily being a business owner.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I think that's really spot on. I definitely
Mm-hmm.
get that impression about some shops, and I've seen it,
Mm-hmm.
myself. And quite
Mm-hmm.
honestly, when our shop was really small, we had those same challenges. We'd get busy, and then we'd just focus on doing those jobs, and we wouldn't be out talking to customers and doing things, and then it would get slow in the preceding
Yeah.
months. So
Sure,
yeah,
it's very common. It's very common, and it's easy to do,
yeah,
especially in the early days of the shop because they're cash strapped a lot of times, right? They're cash
sure,
strapped. They got to make parts. They got to get parts out the door. They got to collect on those. There's the next door, it's a treadmill, right? And it's hard to get off that treadmill and work on the business, not in the
hmm,
business. And that's one
hmm,
of the things I learned a long time ago, and just being in entrepreneurial circles is the goal should be to work on the business, not in the business.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've time and time again I've mentioned the book The E Myth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read that one, but that's what it's all about. And
It is.
it also
Yeah,
ties
totally.
back to because there's this whole concept of a franchise prototype.
Mm-hmm.
And but that speaks to your idea of making your business very easy to do business with, and people will
Mm-hmm.
want to do business with you, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to go buy a hamburger at McDonald's. Everyone knows what they're
Mm-hmm.
going to get. It's super simple, it's efficient, it's streamlined, and
Mm-hmm.
that business grew. And so that principle of making your machine shop super easy to work with, super repeatable, super yeah, just it's attractive to buyers.
It's a consistent experience. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what Amazon has done with Amazon.com. It's a
absolutely.
repeatable experience. It's easy to do business with, right?
Yeah,
You could go buy every one of those other things on Amazon somewhere else, but you
sure.
don't because it's an easy experience.
Yeah. So you mentioned processes, which we've kind of been
Mm-hmm.
dancing around even just now.
Mm-hmm.
What metrics do you track to make sure you're being super efficient in your shop?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of metrics, and fortunately, we're a pro shop customer, which has really helped us with that and given us probably more data that we can consume. But it's all there. But things that we look at, I mean, to me, uh, on time delivery and quality metrics are where I
Hmm.
focus probably the most. Right
Yeah.
now, I could back up and talk about uh, sales metrics and expenses and those things, but I like to start sort of at what delights the customer. What
Hmm.
delights the customer is if you deliver on time or early and you don't have escapes. You don't
Yeah.
have quality escapes. So those are probably the two things that I measure and I look at the most because I know if we're delivering on time and we have minimal quality escapes within our targets, everything else is going to take care of itself.
Hmm.
Customers are going to come back. Customers are going to repeat. They're going to grow their business, and then I can back up and then I can look at the other things around expenses and uh, overtime. How much are we spending on overtime? Uh,
Sure.
all those other things. But I focus at the end because if everything else is working, then we're delivering on time and we're minimizing escapes.
Yeah. That's kind of the concept of build it and they will come, right? You
It
build
is.
that system to delight them, and they will just keep coming back. And it's
Mhm.
hard to grow a business without customers that keep coming back.
That's right. That's right. It's very tough.
Yeah.
Very tough.
Um, I'd love to hear about some of your biggest challenges today and how you're
Hmm.
trying to solve those challenges.
Yeah, yeah. We have a couple of challenges. One of my challenges right now is space. We have the two facilities, as I mentioned, and both of them are packed
Are they right next
with
to each other, like across a parking lot,
no,
or?
they're 1 mile apart. 'Cause wasn't able to get two right together. They're a mile apart. That's a pain. It's hard to manage. Or keeping not necessarily man. Teams manage themselves well, but you know, I like to be engaged. And I got to say, we have our facilities, we call them lovingly ZYCI 1 and ZYCI 2. And ZYCI 2, I get over there a couple of times a week at the production facility. So I think sometimes they'll feel like I don't care as much about them. But a mile away, sometimes when you're busy, can seem like another state or another country. And
Mhm.
so I don't. So managing two facilities that are separated um, is challenging to me. So I did recently purchase some land nearby, and we're constructing just beginning construction on a 70,000 square foot facility. So we're going to combine the two into one, and then have room
Nice.
to grow at a real state of the art facility. So space is an issue. Electricity is an issue because when you
Really?
start cramming a lot of machines in buildings,
Sure.
you
You run.
start running out of power. So
Yeah.
right, I had uh, two machines delivered this week. We got one delivered this morning, which is a new Akuma MU4000 5-axis with a matrix tool changer, 180 tools, and a Aroa robot integrated with it. And so
Beautiful.
we got the machine delivered today, and now my team is scratching their head like, there's no more breaker space. So we're gonna, yeah, we did think about that, but when we bought the machine, but somehow we figured out we'll solve it.
Okay.
So the electricity, space, and then processes and procedure is something that we never let up on. And when that comes to ProShop, we're using a lot of the ProShop functionality, and we're using it, but not all of it. Right?
Hmm.
There is so much to learn and use, right? And so we're trying to drive more and more of that through the culture. We're pretty good now with quotes and purchase orders and parts and work orders and BOM, but then it goes so much deeper, right? When you
Right.
get really into time tracking and tooling modules, um, uh, tool crib management, there's so many things that we're just continuing to ease our way into. So we actually we do bonuses in twice a year, early
Okay.
June, early December. And so my wife Shireen is my partner, and we were talking about it the other day that sometimes some of the metrics that we use for bonuses is kind of soft. And for the June bonus, it's next June, we're making 50% of that bonus tied to ProShop usage and adopting some advanced features.
Wow.
So,
That's very
so we
interesting.
because we
And
think
is is that bonuses, is that profit sharing, or just you just put aside some money to give as bonuses?
yeah, we just put aside. We just put
Okay.
because yeah, that's a whole nother topic about profit
Sure.
sharing. Right?
Yeah.
How do you calculate it? Right?
Right.
How do you
Yeah.
because especially when it's a business that is a single owner, and it's
Hmm.
easy to who decides what expense goes to the business and what doesn't. And
Sure.
so
Sure.
profit sharing is a little nebulous, but we just
Got it.
decide to reward people that have done a great job, that are valuable and try hard. So we try to do that twice a year, so it's a good retention tool that they get a nice little chunk of money a couple times a year.
Hmm.
And but we're going to tie 50% of their next one to increasing their like for a good example, machinists. We have to chase them to stay after logging their time to a work order, right?
Right.
And so that's going to be a metric for the machinist. If you're if you do a good job keeping your time tracked, then you got it. If you don't, then you're going to be missing part of your bonus. And I think when you speak to people's paycheck, it helps reinforce behavior.
Yeah. Well, I will remind me. I will send you a video. I was visiting with a customer down in Louisiana, and I was out at at a machine 5-axis mill, and the machinist there, um, he was so proud to show me his time tracking, and he not only how much he logged, the total hours he logged, but how he did against targets.
Oh wow!
He'd been tracking like 96% of every minute that he was in the facility for payroll.
Yeah,
And I'll show you that video. You can share that with your
that's,
team. It's
that's
if you want,
fantastic.
those are the kind of folks you want.
Yeah,
Because
and that's right, and that's the goal, right? That's what I want. I want to get that kind of level of detail to
yeah,
know. Are we making money? Are we not? Are we overcharging? What are we doing here? And
sure,
so there's and so ProShop is so well. I'm not trying to turn this into a commercial, and I know this isn't the point of our talk here,
yeah,
but it's so well thought out of the way aerospace businesses work that you know I wasn't in aerospace machining until 8 years ago,
Mhm.
and then I sort of found my way into ASA 100. So as we get deeper and deeper into it, and as we learn more about producing flight hardware, the genius of what you guys did at the Pro Shop just sort of emerges.
Mhm.
When we first adopted it, I thought it's kludgy, it's overdone, there's too much here. But then as we evolve and as we get more sophisticated, the things that we start to think about, we realize you guys already thought about that.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that mostly goes to my partners Kelsey and Matt. They are the brains behind the
they are
architecture.
good. They are
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, awesome. I want to be conscious of our time. So as we start to wrap up here, you've obviously dropped, I think, just incredible wisdom. Like that's the whole point of this show is to share wisdom of more experienced shops, and just from your MFG experience and ZYCI and everything else. Just
Mhm.
so much great advice.
Thank
Um,
you.
what would you say that shops of any kind, any size, should be doing today in 2022? Like, what are the things that they should be really focused on?
Yeah. So I think certainly you have to be focused on what is your differentiation, right? If that differentiation can be whether it's speed, it's a niche, it is flight hardware production, flight hardware prototyping, whatever it is, you have to figure out something that you do well and is your niche. Now there will be other people in that same niche, but I think doing that instead of being a generalist is I think being a generalist is going to get tougher and tougher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of competition in the market at that end, right? You've got these big services like Proto Labs out there, lots of others that are playing in the market. Those guys are really really fast and really efficient at taking a block and drilling two holes in it, right? And so you're not going to compete well when it comes to simple generic kind of machining. You're going to have to do something that's a little more complex.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to be 5-axis or wire EDM or Swiss turning. You have to pick a lane and own that lane.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be generic and you can take uh, certain non-sophisticated, non-complicated parts, but the margin is going to be very very low. It's going to be hard
Yeah.
to scale up, hard to grow significant business. Uh, and so I think niche and focus and spending a lot of time talking to your customers. They have a lot to say, and just call them up and chat with them, and they'll tell you what their goals are and their company's goals and what's on their mind. And that's one of the best ways to grow a business is just listening to your customers.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, if people want to learn more about you and more about your shop, how would you suggest they go about doing that?
Oh, they can just go to ZYCI, ZYCI.com, which means nothing, by the way. When I started it, it was just a 4-letter domain name that I owned and not exactly sure which niche or what we're going to go after. So I didn't want to use a more generic name. I just thought I'll choose a name that means nothing and then I can make it mean whatever it becomes. So people can find me on LinkedIn by just looking for Mitch Free or just going to ZYCI.com.
Well, I know it's a very hard to get a 4-letter domain name, especially a .com these days. So
I
good job on
actually
using that.
so early days I registered a bunch of them, and I was just sitting at home, and every time I would see an opportunity, I would register it. So I've actually got a lot of 4-letter domain names,
Oh,
but
wow.
most of them you can't. Most of them you can't say. They're like GQLD or
Right.
something. And so as I was looking down the list, ZYCI was the only one I could kind of make a word out of. And
Right.
then later I Googled it, like, is that a word? And apparently in Polish, it means the meaning of life. Now,
Oh, wow.
I'm not Polish, but that's pretty cool. And probably the
Yeah.
Polish people come across it and think it's awesome.
I love that story. Great. Great. Well, Mitch, thank you so much for your time today. You shared some incredibly good wisdom and advice for shops, and I know that's my goal to do that. So, thank you so much for your time. Look
My
forward
pleasure,
to.
and thank you for doing this for the industry and for the great job you guys are doing at Pro Shop. We appreciate it.
All right, Mitch. Thank you
Take
again,
care.
and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, bye bye.